and welcome to the Abundant Self Podcast, a podcast where we talk about everything there is to learn and to know about what it truly means to have life and life in abundance. My name is Sharon Chabai, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time it is that you're tuning in to today's episode. As always, I hope you're doing well and staying safe wherever it is that you are. If this is your very first time here, my good name is Sharon Chabai, and welcome to the Abundant Self Podcast. This being episode 7 of the podcast, today we are going to be talking about a very interesting and a very important topic altogether, and that is on authenticity and how we can live authentically, or rather, what does it mean to live authentically? And we are going to be having a little twist to the conversation. But before I get on there, allow me to just give a recap of what we talked about in the previous episode, that is on episode 6, where we were talking about how to be mentally attractive. Now, at the time of shooting this episode, or rather at the time of recording this episode, it is the month of October. And as we all know, October is a month and a time where we just take the time to commemorate World Mental Health. And at the time of recording episode 6, it was World Mental Health Day, just 2 days before. And because of that, I saw that it was equally important for us to have this conversation on mental health right here on the podcast. And of course, because we aim to be different and we aim to offer different value, we decided to have a little twist to it where we were talking about how do we become mentally attractive. Now, the whole conversation of mental health, we have been propagating it from a point of making mental health a global priority for all. And there are very many contributing factors that affect the state of our mental health, be it our environment, be it the circumstances and the issues that we go through. And then when it comes to being mentally attractive, because that also plays into our mental health, there are very many other contributing factors that affect or rather contribute to whether or not we are mentally attractive. And the main thought, or rather the main conversation that we were having on episode 6 is, how do we become mentally attractive? By being conscious of the things that we feed our minds. How do we become mentally attractive? By consciously being aware of what we feed our minds. And the example that we used was when you want to have a physical, or rather when you want to have an attractive physique, it is very important for you to be very mindful and to be very careful about the food that you eat, whether you exercise, sleeping well, and such things, right? So the same way when it comes to our mental health, when it comes to being mentally attractive, it is also equally important for us to also be very mindful of the kind of information, the kind of content that we feed our minds with, be it the things that we watch, the things that we listen to, the conversations we have, the people we surround ourselves with. All these contributing factors have an effect on whether or not we become mentally attractive. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I am inviting you to go right ahead and listen to it. And of course, if you have listened to it, be sure to share it with a friend or whoever it is who you know needs to have this information. And just before I get on to today's topic, remember we also mentioned that if you want to have a deeper understanding, because here on the podcast we present issues in a more, in a way that is easy for us to understand, in a way that is easy for us to grasp, so that even when we're on the go, it's easy for us to learn about such and such things, such as how to be mentally attractive. But if you want to get in the deep of things, or rather in the meat of things, and get to understand what exactly we mean by being mentally attractive, what you need to watch out for, how to become, or other practical steps in which you can take to be mentally attractive, then be sure to check out our blog, that is Chabai by Span, and you will find that article right on there where we're talking deeply, or rather dissecting it much further on what it really means to be mentally attractive. So before we get on, allow me to read just one comment that I got from that particular article that I think is very profound up until now. And this reader said that the things we expose our minds at times not only make us mentally unattractive, but they also affect our very lives in many other ways. They also went ahead to say, as you said, we enjoy the liberty and it is up to us to make a choice of what we want to consume, how we spend our time, and when we fall short, we try to get back on course because we remain intentional to better our lives. And the reason I really loved this comment is because, like we said in the previous episode, what we expose our minds to essentially have the capacity to make us mentally unattractive. But also, what happens when we get off track? What happens when we realize that all we have been doing is feeding our minds with fluff and not nourishment? Because we are intentional about, being the absolute best version of ourselves, is that when we fall short, like this comment reads, when we fall short, it is up to us to also get back up, get back on course, and remain intentional to better our lives. So like I said, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go right ahead, listen to it. And as always, I always appreciate your feedback, and I'm always looking forward to hearing what you think about the conversations that we have on here. So be sure to share your thoughts with me. What did you think about that particular episode? What was your biggest takeaway? And, let's learn together. Let's figure this thing out together. Yes, so without much further ado, allow me to just go right into the topic of today, where, like I said, we will be dissecting what it means to live an authentic life. Now, for most of us, the word authentic, and I even wrote about this on the blog, is a word that has constantly been shoved down our throats. We see it in commercials, we see it in advertisements. Every time you're going for a retreat or for a self-development workshop, you're always being told you need to be authentic. You need to cultivate authentic relationships. You need to live an authentic life. And I remember I was in such a workshop where that was said, and I remember just asking myself, so what does this really mean? What does it mean when someone says you need to live an authentic life? What does it mean when they say that we need to cultivate authentic relationships? What does this word authentic really mean? Right? And sometimes just because a word is being thrown or shoved down our throats left, right, and center does not necessarily mean that we understand what that word means. Right? The same case, I remember I talked about this with depression. Sometimes you can just go on and on about how you're feeling depressed, but really you're just using the word depressed because it's like rounding off to the nearest word, the nearest familiar word, Sometimes you don't really have a word to express what you're going through, and depression could be the nearest familiar word that you're able to associate what you're feeling it with, but it doesn't really mean that you are depressed. So the same way with the word authentic, just because it's right in our faces, just because we see it, we hear it all the time, does not mean we really understand it. Because for me, when I asked myself that question, even while I was in a space where I could ask, okay, so what does this mean? What does being authentic even mean? It made me want to question and take just an introspect and look at my life and ask myself, so based on my understanding or the understanding that has been shared in this particular workshop of what authenticity means, can I really say that I'm being authentic? Because we can just understand a word. It's not enough for us to understand the meaning of a word, but to be able to see it practically, to see it in our lives, where we are applying it in our lives, where we are applying that quality in our lives, that is what makes the whole difference. And because I want to believe that we already have a rough insight or idea on what authenticity really means or is all about, we are going to give our topic of discussion today a little twist. Yeah, where the main question we will be asking is, can one be authentic and fake all at the same time? Can one be authentic and fake all at the same time? And when you think about authenticity, of course, what we're talking about is the quality of, being real, being genuine. So can one be authentic and fake all at the same time? Now, this has been a very daunting topic for me because even as I was prepping for this episode, I kept asking myself, have I been leading an authentic life so far? Because even for me to come on here and talk about authenticity, surely I have to have been authentic, I have to have been living an authentic life where I am being the real me, the real Sharon Chabai, the authentic me, no faking it, just being me. So this was a very daunting and very, sensitive topic for me because I have been asking myself those questions. And am I even being authentic at this particular moment? And if yes, I have been authentic, on what basis can I place my authenticity? Or what can I use to sort of measure my authenticity or quantify my authenticity rather? And the reason this is something that has been eating at me for quite some time now is because every time I ask myself these questions, I am reminded of a time when I would present a different version of myself to different people so that I could just survive, or obtain social favors. And of course, most of the time, these versions that I presented to the world were made up. They were not real, and they were not the authentic me. They were just purely facades, so to speak, that I used as masks so that the person on the other end would not be able to uncover who I really and truly am. Now, when I covered this topic of authenticity on Chabai's pen, I remember coming across a theory called the self-presentation theory. And this theory argues that people tend to package information about themselves in a way that will impress the other person on the receiving end, even if none of it is true. Yeah? So, like me, for example, as I was saying, when I was thinking about this topic, I could remember, or rather when I was asking myself those questions of, have I been authentic? Or am I authentic even in this moment? It would take me back to those moments where I presented a fake version of myself just because I needed to survive that particular scenario, or because maybe I needed to get through that particular moment, or I just needed to obtain social favors, that is, impress the other person, the other people. And this is what the self-presentation theory talks about, that people will present or package information about themselves in a certain way just so that they can impress the other person. And most of the time, this information that they're packaging, sometimes it cannot be true. Sometimes you can be in a crowd, be in a group of people, and you're talking to them, even if it's not your first time, being with them, even if it's not your first time talking to them. They could be your friends, they could be people you actually know, but you just try and present yourself in a certain way that hides, or rather is a cover-up of the real you. And most of the time, us as human beings, when I was reading about it, we use it as a defense mechanism, or when we want to go into survival mode, yeah? And I remember using an example saying, just imagine the last time you were asked to introduce yourself to a new audience or a crowd. Which version of yourself did you introduce to the crowd? Which version? Did you introduce the real you, or was it a made-up version just so that you could leave an impression? Just think about the last time you had to introduce yourself to a group of people. I keep remembering a scenario where I was meeting someone who I had interned with at an organization a while back, and when they started, they were like, hey, my name is so-and-so, and I work with this media house. And now it was my turn to introduce myself, or to reintroduce myself, because we hadn't met in such a long time. And as you guys already know here on the podcast, I quit my job early this year, and now I was in a space where I had to really think, okay, so what exactly am I going to tell this person? Am I going to also present myself in a way that will show that I have everything figured out together? That yes, I'm also working for a prestigious organization, even though that may not be true, you know? So that is what the self-presentation theory argues. It argues that we as human beings, sometimes or most of the time, we tend to package information about ourselves in a way that will impress the person or the other persons on the receiving end. When you think about that question that I've just posed, this is something that happens to us almost all the time. And this happens especially when we become so conformed to the quote-unquote ideal standards that the world has placed upon us. It becomes hard for us to embrace who we truly are and who we are called and meant to be. So that if the world has placed an ideal where you have to be married, where you have to have a job, where you have to live in a certain kind of way, despite, owning who you truly are, despite knowing that this is not the real me, that, I'm not married, I do not have this prestigious job, or I'm not in such and such a situation, you still want to present yourself in a way that the world has put as ideal. And what you do there is that you simply put up an act just so that you can be able, like I said, to obtain social favors. You can leave a good impression. People will like you. People will want to be associated with you. And when I think about it, I like to ask myself, so who lied to us that people will not want to be associated with the real us? Who lied to us that people will not want to associate themselves with the authentic us, that we have to fake who we are, that we have to pretend to be something or someone that we are not just so we can survive? Who lied to us? And as Tori Kelly would say, it's easier to be an actress. I actually like that song. It's easier to be an actress, to play pretend and to not have to be in tune with our realities, both good, both bad, and everything in between. It becomes easier for us to present a version of ourselves that looks authentic to the world, but deep down, only we know the existence of that invisible mask that we have on that no one else can see. Because when you think about it, being, or rather living inauthentically, is akin to wearing a mask. An invisible mask where you're pretending to be something you're not. You're pretending to have it all figured out together. You're pretending to be this authentic version. Let's say the world has already given you an already set definition of what an authentic life should look like. And that is what you're presenting out. That is what you're showing to the world. And this is what we see on social media, where when you look at it, most of the time we do not go and post the wrong things that are happening in our lives. They're just posting the good things, celebratory things. But every time you go on social media and you interact with all these posts, you might actually think that this person has everything figured out, that things are going really well for them. But how true is that? Because we can never really see what is underneath the mask until the person wearing the mask actually takes it off. You can never really know what is underneath that mask until the person wearing the mask takes it off. So to the world, it might look like this person has everything figured out together, but when they take off that mask, do we really want to be associated with them? And I'm reminded about this song by Israel what is his name? I think it's Israel Houghton. There's a song that he sang, and in the song, I cannot remember the name of that song. The concept is that guys are wearing masks, and at the end of the song, everyone takes off their masks, and suddenly they're ashamed of, being seen with the person that was next to them. I cannot remember the name of that song, but it has a really beautiful concept, and I will look for it on YouTube and leave the link to that on the show notes. And it just explains to us how, essentially, one way or another. Most of us have masks on. We are all wearing masks in one way or another. There's something that we just know that maybe if the world knows this version of me, they might not want to associate themselves with me. And so that takes us back to the question of today, and that is, can one be fake and authentic all at the same time? Is it really possible that you can fake to be authentic? That you can pretend to be real. You can pretend to have it all figured out and still be authentic. Can you be a fake authentic and still be the real authentic you? I don't know if that question is making sense, but this is something that we need to think about. This is something that we need to think about. So like I said, when we talk about authenticity, when we define authenticity, in simple terms, or as Google will put it, authenticity is the quality of being authentic. But when you read further on the subject, you learn that authenticity is a psychological concept, and this is achieved when an individual's actions, behavior, or even character matches his or her values and belief system, despite all the external and internal pressures to be otherwise. Just think about that, guys. That authenticity is achieved when my actions, my behavior, my character matches my values, it matches my belief system, despite all the external or the internal pressures to be otherwise. So that means even if I'm getting external pressure from the world to not be real, even if I'm getting even internal pressures to behave in a certain way so that people would accept me, so that people would like me, I still stick to behaving and conducting myself in a way that matches my values, in a way that matches my belief system. And of course, when you think about it, the foundation here is your values. The foundation here is your belief system. So do you have those? Do you have values? Do you have a belief system where, if it is about being authentic, if we are to judge you or rather look at you and ask ourselves, is this person being authentic? Then we go back and refer to your values. We go back and refer to your belief system and then say, okay, so how this person is behaving is actually matching with what they state their values are and what they say their belief system are. Then we can say that this person is being authentic. And this is something that I was thinking about, like I mentioned when I was beginning the episode, where in those moments when I was asking myself, am I being authentic even in this moment? If I am to say yes, what do I have to show for it? If I say that yes, I am being authentic, where is the proof? Is the Chabai that I am right now speaking to you in this podcast the same Chabai that you'll find in other different scenarios, in other different environments? And is that Chabai, is she a true ambassador of her values and of her belief systems? Right? So when we think about this definition of authenticity, it provides that for one to be truly authentic, for you to even boast, pat yourself on the back and say that I am authentic, then you have to be in tune with your values. You have to be in tune with your belief systems that are actively present in your life and that guide how you live your life. What are your values? What are your belief systems? And are they actively present in your life? Because it's not enough to say that you value honesty. It's not enough to say that you value integrity, but you're not actively pursuing those values. It's not to say that these are your values, but then they're not actively present in your life, because then why are they there, right? Why are they there? So when you think about it, when you think about that definition, when you think about everything that we have talked about, you can clearly see that it is quite impossible It is quite impossible to be authentic and to be fake at the same time. It is quite impossible because you're either authentic or you're fake. It is a simple black and white scenario. There's no such thing as, in this scenario, or rather when you're in this environment, you're authentic, but when you're not in this scenario, you're being fake. Because when we go back to that definition of always being in tune with your belief system, with your values, then you cannot afford to be authentic and fake at the same time. Because what that happens is that when you become fake and you again become authentic, when you're both authentic and you're both fake, it's like just having that white sheet. When there's that one small black dot, then of course it's the first thing that you see. It doesn't matter how small that dot is on that white sheet of paper. That is the first thing you will see. And that is how many of us, unfortunately, are living our lives today. Where we are pretending to be real, but pretending to be real does not make you real. I think that is actually the point that I am trying to put across. Pretending to be real. When I pretend to be real, when I pretend to be the real me, it doesn't mean that I am real. When I'm out there, or even when I'm in this podcast and I'm saying that we need to be authentic, and when I go out there and I start pretending to be authentic, it doesn't mean that I am authentic. It just means that I'm putting up an act, where according to other people will say, wow, I really want to be like her. I really want to have the same values, have the same belief system as her. Look at her. She's being real. She's being authentic. But am I really? I think the only person who can ever answer that question is you. Even when the world is saying as though you have everything figured out together, even when the world, and I'm not using that to mean that when you have everything figured out all together means that you're real. I'm just saying that even when the world looks at you and says that you are being authentic, you are actually the only person who can confirm that, because you are the only person who are aware of the values, of the belief systems that are actively present in your life. And so you are the only one who can truly, within yourself, confirm or deny whether or not you are being authentic. So this reminds me, some time back, at an organization where I worked for as a content creator, basically what I was doing was, just writing about celebrities, what's going on in their lives. And I remember one day I was given the assignment to write about celebrities who were caught wearing fake brands. I will never forget that story, because when I wrote it, I even came across like a social media platform, like someone had just started a social media page on their Instagram just to expose celebrities who are caught wearing fake brands. So be it Dolce & Gabbana, be it Gucci, Versace, you just think about any authentic brand that you can think of. These guys were actually caught wearing fake brands. And I remember I was just thinking, how, when you think about a celebrity, what comes to your mind is that, okay, this person, especially the celebrities who have been in the industry for quite some time, who have made a name for themselves, who are earning a good living, or whatever it is you want to call it. At the back of our minds, you already know that, this person can actually afford to buy everything that they want. And that is even why most of us might want to covet their lifestyle, or even want to lead such a lifestyle, because they can afford every single thing that is out there that maybe some of us cannot, some of us maybe only see in our dreams, right? And I remember there was this celebrity that I had, when you start writing about celebrities, somehow you start having favorites. You start having those that you also follow, those that you also enjoy looking at their content. And I remember that she was also on there, as she was exposed as having worn a fake brand. And she used to like to wear a lot of Louis Vuitton. So be it a bag, be it a purse, a scarf, whatever it is, she would always have, just a statement piece of Louis Vuitton with her. And then it was discovered that there was a time, when you constantly, and I think this also plays into the example of when you're constantly seeing someone who is authentic, who is real, sometimes it can be hard to notice when they are not being real, because you already think that, this is who they are, this is what they stand for. So to believe that such a person would go against their own values, it becomes very difficult for you to believe. So the same way, because she was always constantly being seen with this particular brand, people did not notice, or rather maybe it becomes even more easier to notice, but there was a time when she was caught wearing a fake Louis Vuitton. And for me, when I saw that post, I was just, wow. I was like, wow. Even, sometimes, even for us, it can be also hard for us to identify whether this is actually a fake version of that authentic brand, So back to our question. So a brand like Gucci or Versace, these are actually authentic brands. And because they're authentic brands, we already know what, some of us, I don't know, not all of us may know, but most of us already know what a real Gucci bag or what a real Gucci scarf looks like. And I mean, in today's market, we can actually spot whether something is a fake Gucci, or if whatever brand it is. Just think about any brand, not even just on fashion, even when it comes to electronics, whatever it is, you can always tell if you're familiar with the authentic version of that brand. If you know it, if you've interacted with it, then it becomes easy for you to pick out the fake versions, or the ones that have been faked, so that they can be introduced to the market at a cheaper price. So it is just as easy to tell when someone has tried to fake it. When you're caught wearing a fake brand or a fake Gucci, for example, just think about it. When you already know what a Gucci scarf looks like, when you already know what a Gucci bag looks like, you can already tell when you see something that is not the real Gucci. When you can already tell, or you can already pinpoint that whatever this bag is, this is not Gucci. Yes, it might have the initials, it might have the brand colors, the brand signs, whatever it is, but it's still, it's just a fake version of it. So does it still can we still call it a Gucci if it's fake? And that, I think, I was thinking about it when I was thinking about that question of, can one be fake and authentic at the same time? Like when you see a Gucci bag that is real, when you have already interacted with the real brand, and then you see one that is not real, one that is fake, is the fake one still a Gucci, or is it just a fake? Will it still be called a Gucci, or will it be called a fake? When you pretend to be someone else, or when you take on a fake personality, does that really change your true identity? If you who is listen to me pretend to be Sharon Chebai, just using that same example of Gucci to make it more understandable. If you who's listening to me pretend to be Sharon Chebai, when you take on that personality, that fake personality, does that really change your true identity? Think about it. Can we be authentic and can we be fake all at the same time? The same way one would wear a fake Gucci and still insist that it's the real and authentic Gucci, can the same be said of us? Where, based on the world's or the society's definition of authentic, we decide to take on an identity, a personality, whatever it is, that looks real, that looks authentic, when in truth, it is all just an act that we have to put up for survival. And what happens when we play pretend for too long? What happens when we pretend to be real, when we pretend to be authentic for too long? Chances are we will end up forgetting who we truly are, and even end up spending the rest of our lives living a lie, because we have been used to living our lives by the standards of other people, that we forget that each of us has a different path, a different script, so to speak, that is different and unique to all of us. When I think about living out my life's purpose, for example, if I decide to take on the purpose of someone else, first of all, there's going to be a lot of frustration. When I try to pretend to be someone else, there's going to be a lot of frustration, and I'll even have to do more work than the work that I would have done if I decided to be the real me. And the example that I like to think about is, for me, when I was throughout high school and in campus, I really liked being on the drama club. So when you're in drama, or if you've ever acted on a stage before, you know how hard you have to work to remember your lines, to remember what you have to say, how you have to behave. Now think about that in real life. When you're pretending to be something that you're not, you really actually have to put in twice the work, or even thrice the work, so that you can actually make people believe that the version you're actually presenting is real. It's actually modern day deception, where you really have to make people believe that this mask that you have on, yes, people might not know that you have a mask on, but you want to make sure that people believe that this mask that you have on, that it's actually you, that you have not worn a mask. Now, what happens when you wear that mask for too long? I believe it's in this movie, The Mask, where did he wear the mask for too long that it stuck and it couldn't come out again? And it changed his whole identity. I haven't watched that movie in a while. Maybe I'm getting all my facts wrong, but just think about it. When you have that mask on for too long, it now becomes who you are, where now all you ever do is live a lie. And you even forget that you actually had this mask on. You even forget your true identity. Yeah, and that is what happens when you play pretend for too long, when we become so used to pretending. And we as human beings, we are creatures of habit. And that means that if I've already gotten used to the fact that every time I leave my house, I have to pretend to be something else or someone else. Every time I leave the house, I have to wear that mask. I have to show people that this is who I am, even when I'm not. Chances are that one day I won't even have to take off that mask anymore. I won't even have to be reminded that when I get back home, I need to remove this mask. You know, that I need to go back to the real, original version of myself. And are we really doing any fair justice to ourselves? When you try to pretend to be someone else, it is so frustrating, because that is not who you are called to be. That is not who God created you to be. And when you're out there trying to become someone else and you're wondering why it's not working out for you, it's not working out for you because you're living on a script that isn't yours. When God put us on this planet, He gave each of us a different purpose, a different, purpose and plan for our lives. A different script, if you might call it. So if you're out here and you're operating on the script of someone else, surely you do not have the capacity to be someone else. Only I can be Sharon Chebai. Only you can be you. And the minute you try to be Sharon Chebai, then it just doesn't work. So you become frustrated, you forget who you truly are, you forget you're not in tune with your values, if you have any. You're not in tune with your belief systems. And what way of living is that? Some time back, I happened to have a conversation with two of my friends, and we were talking about this notion of people saying that their private life is separate from their public life. And yes, I know for celebrities that for them, there's usually that need to keep a boundary on both, where they have to keep their private lives separate because they need to protect the privacy of their loved ones. But in this case, we're talking about it in the context of a person trying to cover up a mistake they have done, by claiming that what they do in public and who they are in private are two different people or two different things altogether. Now the question is there really anything like having a personal life that is separate from your public life? I mean, and what does that even mean? Because when I think about being authentic, I think about striving to be the same person when I'm in public and the same person when no one is looking at me. When I'm in my room, when I'm in my house, or when I'm out there in the office, in church, or whatever it is, it has to be the same person. And I have had this so many times. I have had people say this, and all it makes me wonder is, so does it mean that you are 2 or 3 different people? That when I meet you, or if I'm to meet you in a different context, that I won't recognize who you are? And if that is the case, so which version of you is authentic? Is it the one in your private and personal life, or the one you present to the public? This is something that I have thought about, especially when someone is trying to cover up something wrong that they're doing. And we have seen this maybe with our leaders, especially with our public figures. Of course, it's a bit harder for them because their life is always usually out in the open. And there's usually this certain way they present themselves that when you come to learn that they did something, you start asking yourself, why did this person do this? And many of them have tried to back it up by saying that who I am in public and who I am in private are two different things. And surely, is that living authentically? Is it? Where who we are at the confines or at the comfort of our homes is different from the person we present to the world. And honestly, I want you to know that I am not saying this out of condemnation, because I have been there. Like I said, there are scenarios where I have presented different versions of myself, or where I have hidden my true identity. I have pretended to be real. I have pretended to be authentic, just so that people would not have to peel through the layers and figure out who I truly am, or what I'm going through at that particular moment. So think about it. The person that you are today, as you listen to this podcast, are you the same person when you're out with your friends, when you're out with your family? And realistically, living authentically is hard, because we already have certain expectations that the world has placed upon our shoulders, that our families have placed upon us, even our own selves, even the expectations that we've placed upon ourselves, that we are too scared of being real, of being authentic, of presenting the true us, because we are afraid that the world might just not like it. That if I tell people that I'm struggling with this and this, that people will, they will judge me. They will not appreciate me. They will want to shun away from me or not be associated with me. Because how can I be struggling with, for example, when you talk about addictions, how many people are struggling with addictions and they cannot share it with their friends, with their families, with their loved ones, simply because they have already been used to presenting this ideal, this perfect person to the world. And the minute they think about sharing this struggle with the world, the minute they think about sharing this struggle, even with their loved ones and their friends, they know that it might not be taken as well as it should have, The fact is that we have created an environment that is actually not safe for us to be real and authentic. Because when we become scared to share our true selves with the world, then surely there has to be a problem. When we are scared of being the real true selves, our real true selves rather, where did all that stem from? I don't think anyone is born and immediately it is in their system that they have to pretend. Or as Tori Kelly would say, that immediately you just begin acting. So can one be authentic and fake at the same time? And what is true authenticity? What is true authenticity when it is possible to fake being real in a world that has propagated this message of you've got to fake it till you make it? You know, we're always constantly being told you need to fake it till you make it. If you want to be this, you have to pretend that you're this so that you can eventually get there. Is there really a place for us to be true to who we were called to be? Have we created an environment where we can feel safe and loved enough to know that we can present the true version of ourselves without feeling judged, without feeling like we're going to be placed or put as an outcast? Have we created that environment? Have you created that environment for yourself, for other people? Think about it. And like I said, when you think about authenticity, it doesn't matter how much you fake it. Only you know whether or not you're being authentic. Because authenticity, like we said, is all about being in tune with your values and being in tune with your personal belief system. So if you're there and you're thinking that, yay, finally, guys know that I'm authentic, and you're thinking that you have been able to deceive people that you're authentic, deep down you know that you're not. Because when you go back and when you cross-check how you lead your life right now with the values that you have claimed upon your life, with the belief system that you claim to be what is guiding how you live your life, then only you know whether or not you are being authentic or not. So think about it. Can you be authentic and can you be fake all at the same time? So before we end on the episode, allow me to read something that I got on my social media today just before I edited this episode. And I remember I was even thinking, the fact that this is even popping up in my timeline, then surely there has to be, all the more reason for us to get this message of authenticity out. So I happened to come across this 2 posts from 2 of my different friends. And they so happened to be in line with the conversation of today. And so one of them posted saying, "How many times have you had people say, 'I'm just fine, thank you'? Now you can tell it's not true, but you can't make them be real with you because they are probably not real with themselves. That's what you call denial. People who are in denial aren't even aware they're messed up. Then even those who are struggling have so much trouble being honest." And this is something that I've said, where right now the environment that we have created for ourselves is that people do not feel safe enough to be real, because there's so many things that are being propagated by the world, by the media, by the kind of even the content that we consume. When you talked about being mentally attractive, that even when someone is struggling, when someone just tells you, "I'm fine," that is usually something it's usually a default response. When someone asks you, "How are you doing today? How are you feeling?" It's easy for us to say, "I'm fine, thank you," because you just want the conversation to move on. But are you being real? And as this post says, you can tell when someone is not being real. You can tell that it's not true, but you can't make them be real with you because they're not even being real with themselves. The fact that they cannot even be real with the fact that they are not doing well, how can you make them be real with you? How can you make them take off that mask? And then another one that I found was another simple one that I found that another friend also posted, said, "Just be who God made you to be." I honestly have no idea. I honestly don't have any perfect definition for that. let's just even scrap off the definition of being in tune with your values and your belief system. Living authentically means being who God made you to be. So it's just that simple. Just be who God made you to be. And she went on to write just beneath that post and say, it is hard and scary when everyone expects something of you. But it would be more fulfilling God's way because He knows you better. And I mean, personally, as a follower of Jesus, I know that it doesn't matter how much pretending I do out here. It doesn't matter how much of a fake I try to be, where I try to pretend that I am real, where I try to pretend that I'm authentic. If there's someone who knows me, even more than I know myself, it has to be my Creator. It has to be God. He knows the version of me that He created. And every time He sees me trying to pretend to be something I'm not, every time He sees me trying to be someone else, I may try to hide that from the world, but if there's something that I can never hide it from, it is God. So as this post says, just be who God made you to be. And I hope that this is something that you can think about even as we bring this discussion to an end. Yes, that is it for today's episode. This has been, like I said, a very daunting episode for me, because the same questions that I am presenting to you today are the same questions that I am currently asking myself. Which then leads us to today's segment of What Am I Learning? So if you have been with us on the podcast, you already know that we have a segment here on the podcast called What Am I Learning? And basically what I do on this segment is just bring to you some of the lessons that I have been learning personally as well, even as I try to bring on these conversations to you. So today I decided to bring this segment towards the end of the episode because it is in relation to our conversation today on authenticity. I recently came across an interview by Oprah Winfrey and Viola Davis on Netflix. And of course, being two of the most iconic women this world has ever seen, it was really a refreshing and an eye-opening interview. So basically what was happening on the interview was that Oprah was interviewing Viola Davis. I don't know, maybe you have seen this interview. So she was being interviewed on her memoir. The name of the memoir is Finding Me by Viola Davis. And so in the memoir, of course, she talks about her story, her upbringing, the kind of challenges that she went through, the kind of experiences that shaped the kind of person she is today. And I remember during that interview, just listening to her talk about her story, I could tell. I mean, sometimes, of course, it is not easy, or rather, most of the time, it is not easy for us to bear out ourselves to the world. There's a scenario that she was narrating of the kind of state of their home back then when she was still a teenager, and, where they used to live, the state of their house, what was even going on at home. And in that particular moment, I remember, I think she even mentioned it in the interview, where she was talking about learning to own your story. That whether it is good, whether it is bad, the ugly parts. I won't, talk about exactly what she said in the interview. You can go look for it on Netflix. And, she was talking about some really scary, some really ugly moments that really shaped the kind of person that she is today. Because Oprah, I remember, was asking her whether or not she can attribute who she is today to what she went through, and she said yes. And I remember just thinking that from the interview, I remember just thinking and just taking it in that I am learning that part of being authentic is owning your story. Who you are, what you are made of, and what you are ready to let go for who you are meant to be. I'll say that again. Who you are, what you are made of, and what you are ready to let go of for who you are meant to be. So authenticity is not cancelling out our stories. It is owning all of it, the good, the bad, and recognizing the lessons that you can learn from all of it. Recognizing, acknowledging how your story, your experiences have brought you, or rather how these experiences have contributed to the person that you are today in this very moment. Well done. That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I mean, if you've listened up until this far, thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope that this conversation has been meaningful to you. And if it has, of course, go ahead, share it with your friends, share it with your coworkers, your colleagues, your family members. Let them plug into this conversation. Remember, today we were asking, can one be authentic and fake all at the same time? So now that we have been talking about Viola Davis and her story, I hope you also know that we have a storytelling blog that is Chibaibai Pen, where we tell the stories of men and women who are doing absolutely great things in their societies. And currently, actually, Chibaibai Pen is on the hunt for new stories. Yes, so if you have a story that you believe the world deserves to hear, be sure to sign up and let us tell your story. I will leave a link to that, or rather, I have left a link to that sign up form on the show notes. So yes, if you have a story to tell, or if you know anyone who their story needs to be heard, then share the sign up form with them. Let them fill it, and we will do our very best to make it happen. As you already know by now, of course, is that at Shabaiba's Pen, we believe that each and every story is worth telling. And I cannot wait for you to just have a read at the latest story that we will soon be publishing on the blog. I am really excited, and I know that it will be as inspiring to you as it was to me. Actually, in fact, at the time of recording this episode, this morning I had an interview with the person that I will be featuring on the blog, and his story is one. I don't want to give all the juicy details, but it is a story that I think I know for a fact it will leave you as inspired as it left me. And usually what I have done on the blog is that I have been interviewing, young people around my, my surroundings, my environment, be it in school, the places where I've volunteered in. But this time, the person that I'm going to be featuring on the blog, just a snippet of what we'll be talking about, is that they were referred to me by someone I recently featured on the blog. And they are, of course, an older person. Actually, I remember when I was meeting them this morning, I was like, oh, so because at the back of my mind, I thought, if he's old, he cannot be that old. But anyway, I think throughout the interview, I was just thinking how it is always so refreshing to get to hear from the older generation, to learn from them, and to soak in the wisdom and the experiences and even the authenticity that is in their stories, in the experiences that they've gone through, and how that has impacted the kind of people that they are today. So be sure to stay tuned for that story. It is going to be coming up very, very soon. Once again, if you want to learn more about what it truly means to live an authentic life, then also some of the benefits that come with living authentically, be sure to check out the blog for the same. As always, the link to that particular article has already been left on the show notes. If you have any thoughts, any feedback that you'd like to add, you'd like to share, just in relating to today's episode, we have a link in the show notes where you can record a voice message. Let us know what you think. And if you're comfortable with hearing your voice, I know many people are not, you might hear yourself in the next episode. As I always like to say, a big thank you to all of those who have already subscribed to the podcast. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to the journey that is ahead of us. If you haven't subscribed yet, no pressure at all. We are still glad to have you here with us. Finally, be sure to check us out on our social media pages. That is at The Abundant Self. And remember, we are currently available on Spotify, we are on Google Podcasts, and we are on Pocket Casts. I hope to see you and hear you in the next episode. Until next time, bye-bye. There you have it. This has been the Abundant Self podcast with me, Sharon Chabai. If this episode has been helpful to you, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We'd also love to hear from you. If you have any feedback or questions relating to today's episode, then go ahead and leave us a voice message on the hotline number in the show notes. Feel free to also rate and review us from wherever you get your podcasts. If you remember nothing else from today's episode, I hope you remember that you have been called to have life and life in abundance, and that I am rooting for you always.